intro, if that's cool with you, before you jump into it.
Of course.
Okay, you guys see the recording started?
Yes, I see it.
Okay, you're good to go.
Alrighty, thanks everyone for joining on. This is Wendy. David Sulzer, our axiomatic catalyst guy, is going to be actually doing the presentation today, or the training. Really what this is about is just how to get the growth portion uploaded into the system and the different checks. So as you guys know, we certified values the fourth Monday in August, as we always do. And so what the normal process then is you take those valuations, you take the utilities, you apportion them out to the correct entities, each respective entities, and then you have to send us back the growth. We are on e-file now, so that submission is the electronic portion, which is what we're going with now, or what we're going to be talking about today. So I gave you a deadline of the 8th because I usually give 2 weeks notice on that. And so the 8th is when we would like to see those up. I know some of you might run into some issues. Just let me know if you are. I know a couple of you have reached out with some various things. Also, just so you know, if you have not finished your 2022 for taxes payable 23 stuff yet in an e-file, that is going to eventually hold you up. I am unsure at this time if it will hold up the growth side, but it will hold you up eventually. And so you will not be able to get your levy approval for sure if you don't get that stuff figured out. And so there is a process to that includes making sure that the axiomatic tests those files before you try to upload anything, so on and so forth. So if you do not have your levy approval through the e-file system, which you should be able to see, you need to make sure to reach out to Melissa. She's our main person that has been working on that. But yeah, without further ado, I will I'll get off my little soapbox there and let David do his magic. And then if you have questions, write them in the chat box, and we will address those as we go along. Otherwise, we'll also have a time at the very end where you can ask questions. But if something pops up, I ask that you stay on mute, but just write it in the chat box so we can address those. All right, take it away, Dave.
Thank you, Wendy. So as Wendy said, we're going to be talking about the auditor's growth form today, which is probably the easiest of all the form submissions, of all the major form submissions. And this is a good lead up to the work we're going to have going on later this fall when we get into the levy and recap. So we'll jump right in.
And actually, I'm going to stop you already. We already had one comment. And Cindy, it was Cindy from Pennington, and she brings up a good point. When we were setting up general deadlines, I told Axiomatic, you know what, just put in September 15th. But that's why in the email, I specified the different deadline that I had, which was the 8th, because I want to make sure we stay on top of this and we don't delay any further. So that is why I said the 8th this year. Next year, it might be the 15th again. Then a year after that, maybe it'll be the 20th. We've never had there's not a deadline set by statute. It's a deadline set by when we need the data. And seeing as we've been having some growing pains with the system, I wanted to up that deadline to make sure that we get everything in a timely manner. So that is why there's a discrepancy between what that and whatnot. But the email is what I decided for the deadline for this year, to make sure that we have plenty of time to troubleshoot any errors or any issues that we may run across, since this is going to be our first full year on strictly e-file.
Okay.
Sorry.
No problem. I have the chat open now, so I should see it if we have any further questions. So I think, as most of you know by now, you've either worked in the system or aware of it, that the state has an e-file system to capture all of this data that used to be filed manually on paper or in PDF submissions. So the system has changed the workflow a bit. Many of the common validations and form cross-checks that used to be done by Wendy and her team are now done in the system prior to your submission. So this has been a big shift in the methodology that the data can't be sent to the state if there are certain high-level conflicts with it. And for some counties, this has been a change in process because prior to this, the state was more flexible with what they'd accept and they'd kind of massage data if needed. But the system has stepped away from that and enforces more rigid validation. But once again, the goal of the system is just capturing data and allowing DOR to review what they need to approve it and get it back to you. So the filings for this year, as we can see laid out, started in the spring with the abstract forms, which were filed by the DOEs. And now as we move into the year, we're getting ready to do the auditor's growth form, abatements, levy, and then recap following. So we have a lot of things happening in rapid succession. I know Wendy mentioned the few counties that don't have your information configured to file your levies. I think we're down to just a few now. It's critical that you get that in or you will not be able to get your levies certified by the state. So the auditor's growth form is really what we're going to be focusing on today, and that kind of kicks off this filing season for the auditors. This captures the basic valuation or the tax base for all of your respective tax districts. I would anticipate that 99% of you are going to just upload a file. We are currently holding meetings with all of the vendors around the state, and they're walking us through their systems, how all of the state's ID numbers are entered, and how you as county users run reports. That's one of the things we're trying to do in response to feedback we've received is have better documentation for the counties on how you can run your respective data sets. So expect more to come on that. But essentially, for many of you, you're going to be uploading your auditor's growth form. Some of you may choose to type it in. That's your just choice. There's some basic validations you go through, but this data, once again, is critical for the levy verification process that's going to come later in the fall. So the way the system works is that we have different form groups. Form groups represent a group of forms that are filed together at a specific point. So the valuation certification is a form group, and the DOE files 5 or 6 different forms depending. The auditor's growth is a form group. It just happens to have a single task. Levies have multiple tasks. Recap have a bunch of tasks. But every form group works the same way. You complete each of the individual forms within a group. Once they're completed, you can do the certification task, which cross-checks among the forms and makes sure that all the data is consistent. If that cross-check is good, then you'll be able to submit your information to DOR. So every form group works in the same way. Once all the form tasks are completed, you can certify. Like I said, in the case of the auditor's growth, we have one single form that you'll complete and then go through the certification task. The auditor's growth does have some internal form checks that it does to make sure that the information aligns with itself. But because it's a form group of one, there is no cross-check to any other forms. It's important to note that your auditor's growth does get used downstream. When you file your levy forms, in particular your tax requests, the tax rate you provide on that report is calculated in the system on its own using the auditor's growth information to validate tax rates. So this auditor's growth information is not only used at this step, but it's used in the system in the levy and the recap to verify that the information is correct. So this is really the initiation of a multi-step process to go through levies. One of the things I want to talk about are what values get filed if you're a county, and this is really more for TIF users. So if you don't have a TIF in your county, you don't really need to worry too much about it. But basically, if you're a county without a TIF, you're just filing your taxable value in all your respective tax districts. Where it does come up with TIFs is here in explaining what information is actually being reported on the auditor's growth form. So starting in the middle, we have a county, a city, and a school district, and a TIF. So all of these districts are stacked up on top of each other within our sample county. In reality, the total value of each of these districts is represented on the left side, showing our base value and then our increment. So throughout our districts where we have a TIF, we can split our value out amongst those two areas, either base or increment. On the auditor's growth form, the values you're providing should be the base for all of your tax districts except the TIF district. The TIF district, you're reporting increment only. So this is the same way it was reported last year. It's just something we like to highlight, that you're providing base for all of your tax districts except the TIF. For the
And I
TIF
want
itself,
to,
you'd be providing increment.
yep, and I just want to, reiterate that exact thing. Your auditor's growth form, there has been no changes to the way you report your growth valuations. What we are seeing here is the exact same thing that you've always done, where we always say you carve out the increment. So there is no change on your auditor's growth. I had there was some confusion with that. I can't remember which county I was speaking with earlier, or sometime last week, but she was under the impression that your guys's, the auditor's position process changed. How we have the director of equalization reporting things has changed slightly, but you are going to be reporting it the exact same way that you always have. It's the normal values that are not in a TIF plus the base values, with your TIF over here being reported separately as for the increment. So just wanted to reiterate that there is no change in your processes.
Yes, exactly, Wendy. We just like to show this to kind of reinforce what values are being reported. But Wendy is 100% correct. There is no change to what's been reported historically. I'm gonna just stop for a second. We got two questions, and I will be doing a demonstration later on, Becky, and we can go over this exact example. But is there a way to edit a submission if you find an error? I submitted it this morning and now found an error with one of the townships. Yep, we can talk about that later. And then Joe is asking, does this affect the growth and reappraisal calculations? And I think, Joe, if you're asking, I'm not 100% sure I understand what you're asking with respect to the growth and reappraisal calculations when you say, does it affect it?
I think what he's meaning is, do you take out any reappraisal or growth value that may be in the TIF increment? So you would remove the TIF increment in its entirety, and wherever that value lies, you would remove it from the entity. If I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. Okay. Yes, you would do it. So if your TIF increment shows X amount in reappraisal, you would need to make sure that between, and just for David, I don't know if you recognize Joe. He's the IT guy for up in Brown County.
Yeah, no, I do. Yep.
Okay. So you would make sure to, from the DOE's value, remove all of the increment value in whichever column it happens to sit in terms of the increment. And we can maybe go over another specific example with you, Joe, offline, but it would come out of every column basically.
Correct. Then we have another question. If there's no change, then why are we putting TIF increment on growth report?
And that actually we have been doing that there. And actually that may be one of those things where, and your county never has, but you were supposed to, and we always just, this county doesn't do it, so then we'll go over here and pull this other report from the DOE. And that's one growing pain that we're seeing across the board is, well, I've never done that. Why do I have to do it now? And that's the standardization piece. We are now requiring all 66 counties to be on the board and report the information the same, as opposed to Wendy needing to change or needing to train her people to think in 66 different ways. So that is why you probably are wondering, Marilyn, like, well, I've never shown the TIF on the growth report before. You, in theory, you were supposed to. We just pulled other reports to try to fill those gaps. We did that a lot with a lot of different things. As David had mentioned, he called it massaging the data, basically, is what we would figure it out so that we could move forward.
That's good. We have another one. Does the previous year value need to be re-imported or reported, or does it pull the previous year value submitted? It pulls the previous year value submitted, Joe, and we'll talk about that. We have a slide coming up that covers that as well. So I'm going to jump back in and we'll continue to take questions throughout, and I'll stop as they pop up. So we talked about this. This is probably not really important for the conversation we're having. I'll talk about the form itself. We're going to jump in and do a demonstration in a couple minutes here, but what we see in the form is the standard layout. You're going to see the dynamic help listed up top, which will take you to the help page to explain how to do stuff in the form. We have the district controls. So if you do want to look at the data itself in the interface or keying in information, you can select each of the respective tabs running across the top of the screen to see the groupings of districts. And then within each grouping, you have a pick list to select amongst them. Below that, we see our actual growth form. We'll talk about prior year values in a minute, but we see the layout of the form standard. In the upper right-hand corner, we have the upload file button. That's where you'd initiate your upload, which most of you will be doing. Next to that, you have the report button, which allows you to download the information in PDF or Excel. And then in the bottom right-hand corner, you have all of your standard controls, the save button, the complete button, which will attempt to complete the form and do the validation check, and the cancel button.
And David, we don't need to talk about it right now, but are you going to be talking a little bit more about the reports function at some point during the presentation? Perfect. Okay.
Yep, we jump into the demo. I'll go through the reports.
Perfect.
Prior year values. So Joe had asked this question a minute ago. Essentially, what we do is take your 2022 current year values and migrate them forward into 2023 as your prior year. So if for some reason you feel this value is incorrect, you can reach out to the help desk and we can adjust it. We are talking about making this field editable for next year as well. It's just one of the things we're looking at. But for now, all that information is pulled directly. Megan, you're saying your PY value is showing as 0. I'll have to check, report to me what county you're in. If your 2022 forms are still not completed, that could be one of the reasons why. So I'll have to look at your specific county. So jumping ahead, that's prior year information. We talked about uploads. I see what your comment, Megan. I'll take a look at that and have it checked on. Uploads run on a 5-minute loop, so we can do bulk processing. So essentially, when you upload a file, you'll get a ribbon running across the top of the screen that will say your upload is in progress. If your upload is successful, you'll see your data. If your upload fails, you will get a message at the top of the screen telling you that it failed. When you attempt to complete your auditor's growth form, it will run through 2 checks. The first check is that it's going to look at the total value for the county. So it's going to take the sum of the CY value for the county and compare it to the sum of the CY value for the towns, town/city, township, and road districts. So it's basically saying, is the county's value equal to the first level of government up from the county? So this basically says, does the county equal the sum of these values? If it does, then you're good. The second check is, does the CY value for the county, so that same value we just checked, also equal the sum of the CY value for all the school districts? If that checks out, then things are good. So those are the two checks that the form is doing, is basically saying, does the sum of all the information that's supposed to cover the county equal the same amount as the county? If you fail either of these two checks, you get a red ribbon running across the top of the screen that will indicate that they failed.
And if it fails and you get that red ribbon, then you should go back and look to see if you can figure it out. Because that would be no different than the old way of you submitting it to us, because we would have done that check manually and we would have sent it back to you saying, hey, there's something wrong. Your schools adding up together doesn't match your countywide total, or whatever the case may be. So it's the same process. It's just that instead of me or my staff emailing you, it's telling you immediately, hey, this looks funky. You should look into your file and your data and see if there's something that needs to be done.
A question coming in. So if we edit it manually and resubmit, does that override the uploaded file? Yes, that is correct. The uploaded file just seeds the information into the program. So it just populates all the fields essentially. And at that point, you can make adjustments if you choose to. Obviously, the system's still going to run that cross check. So we tell people sometimes that have small errors, rather than trying to fix your upload, it may be faster for you to just go in and make the manual adjustment. And when we get into the demo in a minute, I can show you what I'm talking about. Once you complete your auditor's growth form, you still have to go through the certification check. When you go through that certification check, the system is going to basically run through any cross-form verifications that it needs to do. But since the auditor's growth is a group of one, all it's going to do is check to make sure that that form has been marked complete. Once it's been completed, you can go ahead, check the checkbox, and submit the data. Once you do that, basically your submission is with the state. The state can return it back to you if adjustments need to be made, or they can complete their review at that point.
One thing here too, that if you see that fail, there is something wrong, you should go back and take a look. Or if you can't figure out what's wrong, get a hold of Melissa, Brianna, or myself. But yeah, don't hit the complete button or anything like that, just because there is going to be something that will pop up that is causing it. And even if you can complete the button, because we ran into this, so it was a weird situation and somehow it got through. But really, then we had to go back and reopen it and fix it anyway. So just so you know, if there's a fail, make sure to do your due diligence to say, okay, what is it that I'm not doing or is not matching up and whatnot.
So Wendy, we have another one in the chat. Are the amounts in the reappraisal supposed to match our current abstract for DOE reappraisals, which are in the negative?
Well, the reappraisal column is the least important column in my mind. You need to make sure that, and it might change depending on if you have TIFs, which I know that you do, Marilyn. And so, because really at the end of the day, the important thing is that column 1 + 2 + 3 equals column 4. And what happens is it's even more important is really that it's the current value for that the director of equalization has given you minus the growth in column 3 minus the previous years is the remaining will show up in the reappraisal column. That's why in the new system, in the new e-file system, you can't mess with the reappraisal column because it will just automatically populate. It will fill in what it needs to be. So as long as you have the correct values in the other three, I mean, it's possible. Like I said, it might be a little bit different with the DOEs because the DOE's growth now is reporting all value, including TIF. So once you remove that TIF, your reappraisal column might move around a bit.
All right, I'm going to jump into the demo now. I think we can come back to the help stuff in a second. So let me switch over to my browser. I logged in here as a county user. I'm in Campbell County. I can zoom in a bit. So when I log in, I can go back to last year's information, by the way, by selecting 2022 if I want to see what my auditor's growth form was. You can always go backwards if needed. I'm on the test server as well, so don't worry, I'm not working in any real information. So you can see auditor's growth is our top form group here. If we select it, we see just what we were talking about before, one form and a certification task. So if I go to the auditor's growth form, we see all the information entered in here. So I went through and worked on this one earlier. You see that I'm in Campbell County. If I want to switch, I can go look at my townships. Here's my unorganized. I can go to the cities and toggle amongst my various cities. I can go to my school districts, do the same thing. So for most of you, you're never really going to toggle through stuff unless you are hand entering information or you have a problem. The way most users interact with the system is they go to the upload button and they upload a file. I'll talk about uploading in a minute, but that's the standard path for everybody. So to the question before, if you upload and then you want to make edits, how do you make those edits? So here's an example of a form that's been filled out through an upload. I still have the ability to go in and change anything I want. So let's say, all right, I didn't have utility value in here for some reason. I could go in here and enter a utility value. I'm just stopping for a second. I see some questions. So when I look at my final adjustments for 2023, that is in the PY value, some are off by $1. Those would be the whatever values were provided from the last year. So they should match your 2022 final values identically. The script literally goes in the database, grabs the value, and just drops it in the next place. There's a question coming through the chat. Can you edit after you have submitted and hit complete? So there's a differentiation. When I hit complete here, it's going to run that validation script we talked about, and it's telling me that I have something off. I have to go back and fix that in a second. And I'm guessing it's my utility value that I entered. Yep. So now the form's complete. So at this stage, I've completed the form, but I haven't hit my certification task yet. And so if the form is done, but the certification task isn't complete yet, I can reopen the form anytime by hitting reset complete. If I complete my form and then I attempt to complete the certification task, or if I do complete the certification, I'll need to request to the state to return it to me. The state can always return the filing, but you have to request it, and the state would then be able to send it back to you. It's not something that you can do after you've sent in your certification. Sorry, I'm just gonna go back here and then go back to my auditor's growth, and I'm gonna reopen it. So what I can do here, obviously, as we talked about, I can edit anything I want. I can go to the reports and I can run an Excel report. I can run a PDF report. So let's say I upload my data, I'm good to go. I try to complete. Because we have a variation that allows something that small. I'm gonna put a much larger number in and attempt to complete it. Still within the variation. So let me do this. It'll make my life a lot easier. I'm gonna make that 0. So if I attempt to complete this form, it's going to give me an error. It's going to tell me it can't complete it. And this is the certification we were talking about, where the form is trying to make sure that this CY value for the county matches the sum of the city and the township, and separately I'm just going to discard my change there. The sum of the schools. So this question always comes up. I have an error. How do I know where the error is? And we've been doing a lot of changes to the app, which you guys are going to see in the levy process. Many of them revolve around enhancing validation and error messages to make it clearer where problems are. And we're working on some reports as well. But with the auditor's growth form, there's always a telltale sign that there's something wrong with the upload. And that would be if you have a district that looks like this. If you see something that's all 0 on the current year value, and that district has value, that's just a red flag right away that says, this didn't populate for some reason. And so that's always the first place we check. The reason for this whole translation process is that the vendors had asked, well, what if we don't use your numbers? Can you go through a translation table so that if we don't use the state's ID numbers and we deviate from it, you can still read the files correctly? And in that translation process, it ends up creating issues sometimes for counties because you have values in your files that don't end up making it into the application or don't find a home. We've been working with the DOEs over the last year to make sure their numbers align with what you as auditors have been filing. So we shouldn't see as many of those problems come up. I anticipate with the work we've been doing with the vendors that you all should have files that contain the correct values. Wendy alluded to some issues with the contents of the form. We've seen auditors growth forms that include the TIF increment and things like that. So really, we want to make sure that the content of the form is correct. But as far as the upload and the translation, that's the one area where if you do run into an issue, you're going to want to come to us, the help desk. And the way you can always identify a translation problem is with that no values loaded in a district. The way I would look for it is just run either the Excel or the PDF report and check and see, do I have any districts that don't have values?
And I really want to reiterate that too, because that's how we how we find some errors too. So if you come to us and say, oh, this isn't matching, or I don't know what's wrong, we are running those reports out of here, either into Excel or PDF, depending on what we're trying to do. And so really use that functionality. That will be very helpful and in helping you see the information that you've put in there, because you can't see the big picture with each individual tab here. And especially if you are a county that has 10 school districts, you know what I mean? So use that report functionality. And actually, I want to give a shout out to, I believe it was Susan in Minor County. She found an issue with one of the way the school district levy was reporting in her county last fall or earlier this year when she was uploading her levy stuff, because she was running those reports and recognized, hey, that looks funky. I better talk to Wendy about it. So use that to your advantage. It might be a little cumbersome at first, but that's one thing in general. And I'm kind of veering off tangent here. I apologize, but this is a new system, so it takes some tinkering around to really get used to it. So play around with it and get in there. Don't be afraid of it, and just start working around. And once you start doing that, it becomes much, much easier. That's one thing that Melissa and I have found. So
I'm just looking for a county that has nothing in it so I can show you guys how you'll encounter your forms for the first time. So this is the way the auditor's growth form will look to most of you when you first log in. You'll see prior year value is pre-populated. And then obviously reappraisal is a calculated field. So it's waiting for a CY and a growth to actually properly calculate that reappraisal and then the growth percentage. So most of you, you'll just get here, you'll hit upload, you'll upload your file, it'll be good to go. Let's see, I might have a growth kicking around here that I can kick off so I can show everyone what the upload scenario looks like. So it's Jackson. We'll use a factored growth, but it should accomplish the same goal. So when we initiate the upload, you'll see that blue ribbon now appears on the page, and it's saying that the file is being processed. Files are processed every 5 minutes. Refresh the screen once if you want to see progress. You don't have to sit here and wait for it, by the way. You can leave and go do something else and then come back. It's still going to persist that message. When the file uploader grabs it, if it processes the file successfully, the ribbon goes away and you'll see data in the form. If it has an error, you'll have a message across the top here saying that the file format was incorrect and you need to re-upload. So we're getting a question. If we upload and wait for it to load, then can we check everything before we actually submit or run the report before submitting it? Yes, you can run the report at any time. So as soon as you have data in the form, you can go ahead and hit report. The reporting is anytime you want. It's on demand. Any additional questions while I'm stopped here? So Marilyn is asking, is the reappraisal that is preloaded supposed to be the DOE growth on the abstract that we just certified? No, the reappraisal you see on the screen by default is purely a calculated value in real time. So if I go in here and put 350 and then hit save, it's going to recalculate. I believe I have to put in as growth as well. That should recalculate. Oh, it's because I have an upload running. It should recalculate our reappraisal to reflect the appropriate value. So that would be the reappraisal that is calculated as a direct result of what you enter into the form itself. Other questions so far? I wanted to highlight the help page as well. It's going to load me into the default view of the help desk, but when you click on the help, it's going to open in this case, the factored growth, which is the same form, walk you through the process of the form itself. If you have questions on how to upload information, you can go to the upload instructions, but those all appear on any page you're on. You will always see that dynamic help up here at the top. See, our uploader is still running. So additional questions so far?
One thing, I don't know if this will help you or not, Marilyn, but so when we say reappraisal, we're not necessarily meaning like when a directory equalization, they have a reappraisal, cycle. I mean, it captures that, but really what that second column is in the growth form is the change in value, just the change in value that is not growth. So we have our previous year values and we have the growth values, and then whatever the additional changes in values were is what we lump into what we call the reappraisal column. And I don't know if that's where because you keep bringing up the abstract piece, and so I don't know if there's just a nomenclature confusion there, but I just hopefully that helps. It probably did not, but anyway, back to you, David.
Well, the reappraisal is really just like a calculated remainder. It's you take the prior year, you take the current year, and the net new, and then whatever's left has to be a reappraisal, either positive or negative.
To answer your question, Joe, you really don't want you don't want to submit a growth that has 0 in the reappraisal or prior year values, because we have to calculate a growth percentage for the property tax limitation calculation. And so we need to know what was the new construction value, and we use the prior year value to calculate that. So we need to have accurate numbers in there.
All right, that's all I had to cover, Wendy. I mean, I think everyone who's in here has credentials. Obviously, if you don't, you can reach out to us at the help desk. And if you click help on the application, it's going to take you right into our desk, which you're seeing my view as a user, but it will take you to the generic help page, which I'd have to log out here to show you. Let me log out. Which will look like this. You can just hit new support ticket. You can call us. So if you want to get a question into support, you can do that there. You can also go to the specific area in the knowledge base related to South Dakota, and you can go through any of the articles related to the different forum groups. You can go to the training session from last year and see if it's any better or worse. So all that information is available to you, and we're here at the help desk for questions. Like I said, for most of you, we really hope that it's just a matter of running your report from your system and uploading it into ours. If you see districts with no values that you think should have values, then that's always a telltale sign. You should send in a help desk ticket and say, I think my values aren't translating correctly, and we'll get on it. If you see values in all your districts, but the math's not working, that generally indicates a problem with your file from the vendor. I am fairly confident at this point the vendors are able to produce the right files. I know for some of the Tyler users, you have a lot of options available to you when you run reports, specifically the Encode users. So just make sure that you're aware of whether or not you're including increments or what other configurations are available for those reports.
Yeah, that kind of brings us, the help piece. I know that there's kind of been a Bermuda Triangle kind of of getting like who do you need to contact for the correct help, and we're still trying to work on that. It's been kind of a thing ongoing since the beginning. Ultimately, and she'll probably shoot me for saying this, but really, I think your number one stop after trying to do your due diligence, of course, because we want you guys to, I mean, this is your data. You need to be responsible for it. You need to understand what's in there and how it works, of course. But we also don't want you to beat your head against the wall for too long or give up completely. So reach out to Melissa. You can also reach out to Brianna. I know she's brand new, but she is a smart cookie. And both of those ladies have really been diving headfirst into this process and learning the ins and outs. So reach out to one of them. Then they can help direct, saying, if they are like, oh, this seems like it's definitely more of an axiomatic question, they'll let you know if you need to contact support or if you need to contact your vendor. We might say, hey, have you talked to your vendor about this? Because that might be the best thing. And if you speak to your vendor, make sure to let them know that it's the information in your system that you need help with, not necessarily, I realize that yes, it is for e-file, but also how to get the information in your system and how to and work your system to get the information out correctly. Because they're not here, your vendor is not here to give you support to upload stuff, and Axiomatic and Department of Revenue can't help you with your system. So there are two different things there. So make sure to be very clear with your vendor and with us with whatever you are having issues with, just so that it can try to speed things up and go along that line. And I know this is kind of harping on, beating a dead horse, but I'm going to share my screen here and run a real life report. And I see that Aurora County has already submitted, so I'm going to pick on her. So if you go to the auditor's growth, you can see that now this is my screen. So I can see what the filer has submitted and what I need to review. But if I go into what she actually uploaded and goes into this report button, if you hit the PDF, and I don't know where it will pop up on your screen, mine goes up to the very top.
Some people it will open in another tab for them.
Yep.
Depends on
And
how your browser's configured.
yes, because it used to be different for me and it just changed so that it goes up. And I don't know if I really like it, but that's beside the point. Anywho, if you run that report, the report looks very much like the growth report out of your, that we're used to, the paper report. So it shows the prior year value, the reappraisal column, the growth column, the current year value, and then it does a growth calculation percentage from the growth to the prior year. So, and it will show every single one of your entities, each one of your cities, each one of your townships. If you have the special districts, they'll be towards the bottom. If you have any TIFs, they'll be towards the bottom. And then the very last screen gives you a snapshot of all of them. So then it shows you just if you add up all the cities, this is what the current year value is. And that is just, yeah, so that can just be really helpful.
Here's a great place to do the check. Don't close it. Sorry,
Oh,
Wendy.
don't close it. Okay, that's okay.
So if you look on where it says county under current year value, and then school under current year value, same place you were, that same right
Yep.
below it. That's the one check we were talking about. It's going to make sure those two values are the same. And then it's going to take township, which is the bottom value, 826,901, and add the 69,354 to it and check it against the 896 million. So those are the checks. So if you get down to the bottom and you see the sum of those numbers is wacky, you know that it's one of two things. Your data is bad, or that some of the data didn't make it in because it wasn't translated correctly. The way to tell is always by if you have a district that has no value in it, that's always a translation problem, because that means that when we read your file, we couldn't find the proper home for it, so the file just dropped it and it didn't insert it. If you look and you see that some of these numbers just doesn't align and all of your districts have value, that means there's a red flag with your import file that you want to go back and look at the actual file itself that you loaded. I would, if I were a county user, turn around and call the vendor and say, I ran this file, the math doesn't work. Like I said, I think there's a low probability of that this year because the vendors we've spent a lot of time talking with them. And Wendy, can I add one other item?
Absolutely.
I think it's important, since we're talking with the auditors, to go over something that happened in June. I was at the South Dakota assessing officers meeting in Sioux Falls, and this question of support triangle came up, and the county saying, we call a vendor, we call you, we call the state, and how do we better coordinate that? And I alluded to this before, but one of the things we're doing is having all of the county software vendors do meetings with the state that are recorded, where they walk the state through two primary actions: how to code the state ID numbers into their systems, and then how to run reports. Also coming out of these meetings are the vendors providing the state with PDFs of how to run through step-by-step instructions to run reports. This is just one thing we're trying to do, and this was feedback we received from the DOEs saying, when we ask simple questions, we still get bounced around, and we concurred with them. We said, we don't know how to run your systems. We're not the software vendor for the counties. The state doesn't have a view into your local CAMA system or your tax system. But what we can do is try to coordinate better with the vendors to understand when we get simple questions, how those things are done. So that's something else that's going on in the background as well. And I think that's going to be really critical as we roll into levy season. The auditor's growth form is the one that concerns me the least. Obviously, the 73s, the 74s are the most complicated. So I want to make sure that we have everything positioned as we get there.
Yep, and we definitely are not wanting to take over the customer service aspect of your vendors. But if it's a question of, well, where do I need to enter your entity ID number or this fund ID? We might have a better idea, because then we can pull up this workflow from your vendor and say, oh, it's this box here. And boom, you can then move on, because it's something that is necessary for our system. If you're wanting...
I was just going to say, I can't tell you how many times we've been asked, where do I enter the district ID
Yes.
or the entity ID that you've just issued to me? And that's the thing where it's frustrating for a county, because we say, well, you got to go talk to your other vendor now. And it's like, well, how many people do I have to talk to for this? So we're just trying to cut down that support chain.
Yep. And for big issues, building in TIFs or dissolving TIFs or something like that, that's still going to be out of our hands. We're not going to touch it. But for those coding things to get the information out correctly, that's where we will come into play. But yeah, I just really, really wanted to harp on this uh, reporting function. There is an Excel one. It's a little bit more, I mean, it's raw data, so it's not quite as pretty. But if you are fluent in Excel and like to play around, there is that opportunity. Oh, don't mind, that's something else. Hold on a second. Yeah, I mean, it's there. The growth column there is kind of in a funky spot, but the growth percentage, but the information is here and it is technically the same. It's just that rather than in the hold on a second, there we go. Rather than in the nice little grids, it's, you know, it's just columns of data. So just so you know, there is that option though too, if you feel comfortable monkeying around with that.
Or if you're a pivot table person, it's really easy to run a pivot table on this and get your sums,
Which,
which
yep,
is what
it
I do
is.
when most of you come to me with a question about that validation. That's the first thing I do. So as most of you have come to the help desk know, the first question is response is always send me your files so we can see what's going on. How do we get someone set up in Axiomatic is a question from Fall River. If it's someone, if you already have an account in the county and you're trying to get someone else set up, send an email to the help desk saying this is the person, this is their name, and we will get their account set up. We will need their email address as well.
And Jackie, I don't know if this is the email or a voice message that you had sent Melissa earlier today about a ditch or something like that. Because if it is, that's on me. I haven't had an opportunity to give you a call back, but I'm not quite sure because I'm assuming you mean the special assessments, and special assessments only show up on the recap. Okay. Yeah, I will give you a call back so we can discuss that more in, just because that's a unique situation. But yeah, to get someone set up, as David said, contact support. But there is also a actual form out here if you want to go through that process if you need a brand new thingamajigger. So, all righty,
Usually, if someone is an authorized state user, we usually, we'll take that as the official word. But like Wendy said, if you need all new accounts and you've never been in before, then yeah, the form is the way to go.
Very good. So we're at 5 minutes left of our meeting. I think this was an hour meeting. So are there any other questions? I do think, like, I will echo what David said, that I have the least worries about the growth thing. I think that it will be relatively painless. I know quite a few of you have already submitted, which thank you for that. I appreciate it. And just keep, plugging forward and we will troubleshoot each one. Melissa is taking the lead on it. Of course, she is still working with those few that are still doing 2022, and that's her priority to close that up so that we can move on to 2023. But she is kind of our point person for anything with Axio or with the e-file system. And then of course support is always there too, but if you need to talk to someone at DOR, she's your gal.
Thanks, Wendy.
You're welcome.
No, don't hesitate to reach out to me, because as I've dug deeper into this, I have been able to help a little bit more. And if I can't, I just bother Dave and then he helps me.
That's right.
Team effort.
That's right.
Very good. All righty. So yeah, we will be posting this training. I know a few people weren't able to get online, but yeah, I'm hoping that this helps ease a couple of fears, and then we will be having similar trainings for when we get to the abatement side and the levies and all of that stuff. So watch out for those trainings, but we will be doing similar trainings for each step of the way. Alrighty. Lauren, is there anything you want to say before you shut off the recording and we say goodbye? Or David?
Nope. I have nothing else.
Alrighty. Well, thank you all for your time today, and we will I will probably be seeing you, or most of you, next Tuesday in Sioux
Not
Falls.
me. Nope.
Okay, well
Won't
then I
see
won't
me
see
next
you.
week, you Falls.
Okay.
No, Wendy.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.